common questions. That's what we're going to talk about this week. And let's start with a very common question for lenders, which is, when does my lender get paid and by whom? This is really important for people that are starting to buy and they might want to be saving their money for their nest egg or for their closing cost or just for the moving expenses that they have. And so the idea of paying for a lender just to check in on the process and maybe get pre-qualified is daunting. Well, here is the good news. A lender cannot charge any fees upfront. All of the lender fees are going to be charged at the closing, with the exception of a couple of third-party fees. One, they can charge for the credit bureau, which is not typically a very expensive amount, but they could charge a credit bureau fee. It's not common. Most lenders don't, but they can legally do it. The appraisal is a very common fee that you would pay. And again, that's not going to your lender. It's going to the appraiser so that they can go do the appraisal. But that is a very common fee. Once you get under contract and it's time for the appraisal to be done, you will probably get a link to pay that appraisal cost up front. The third one is also not very common, but every once in a while it is legal for a lender to charge an application fee. This is a set amount. They have to charge it on every single file, and that application fee could be required to be paid up front after you've signed some disclosures. So you're not going to pay that application fee just to start the process. But once you go under contract and you're using them, they might charge that application fee. Again, it is extremely rare. It's not normal to have that application fee, but legally they could charge for that. Now here's the next part of that question is, who pays those fees? So at closing, you're going to have, your underwriting fee. Sometimes there's a processing fee. You might have points for the interest rate that you chose. So you might have some extra closing costs there. Then you've got all the third-party fees like title, recording, your first year of insurance, your portion of taxes. All of those fees are for the buyer. Now, who pays them will depend on what you negotiate up front. You can always negotiate for the seller to pay your closing cost or part or all of those closing costs, but you need to do that when you are making the offer. This is not something you can do at the last minute and say, oh, I thought the seller was going to pay my closing cost. Not unless you negotiated for those sellers to pay your closing cost. Now, here's one thing a lot of people don't know, and that is when you go to closing, you're going to bring one check or wire one amount to the title company. You're not going to bring a separate check for your lender and a separate check for your down payment and all the other third-party closing costs. The nice thing is you bring one big deposit, one big amount for all of your fees, all of your down payment. You wire it or bring a cashier's check directly to closing, depending on the state that you're in. You bring it to closing, and then the title company will make sure all of those parties are paid according to your closing disclosure. All right, so that is a very common question for buyers. Good news, when you were just looking to find out how much you can afford, you just want to know if your credit is good and maybe even get some credit repair work done. All of those things are not even legal for a lender to make you pay. So come and check it out. Come find out what your path looks like in order to buy a house and know that there are no upfront fees for that. We're here to help and get you ready to buy.